Compounding is probably the most important concept that we're going to learn about in saving and investing. It's compounding that makes our money grow, and it not only makes our money grow, but makes our money grow more quickly with each return that's added in each subsequent period of time. For example, if we start with some small amount of money and add a return to it in the first year, that second year we'll start with a larger sum of money and get a return on that larger sum. So corresponding, and in the second year, therefore, the money will grow again, but it will grow by a slightly larger absolute amount than in the first year because we're working the return on a larger amount. And that happens every year. And as these returns are added on, and as they add up and cumulatively create a larger sum, then the returns also in each year grow and grow. Now this has been called the eighth wonder of the world, and it's been focused on a lot, but it is really one of the key concepts to any saving and investing plan. Let's look at an example. If we have $1,000 compounding at 5%, if we look at the following exhibit, we can see that the return in each year is obviously present. In the first year, 5% on $1,000 would be 50, and in the second year, the amount has grown to 5250, and by the time we get to the 10th year, that return of 5% is actually delivering an incremental 77.57. So what do we see from this? We see that the money grows, but it not only grows, but it grows faster and faster each year. And we can see that in the following exhibit. We see that the amounts grow, and obviously they grow faster and faster the longer we leave the money in place. If we left the money in place for another 10 years, we could see that the money grows and grows even more, and we can see that from this exhibit. How the money grows over time on a chart, and we actually look at how what the cumulative sum is that we have at any point in time, we can see that the money doesn't grow in a straight line fashion, but it actually does grow faster and faster, almost resembling a ski slope, which is much steeper at the top and somewhat flatter at the bottom. And we can see that in the following exhibit. A key element of any saving and investing plan, because it really makes the argument to start early, and it really makes the argument to let money accumulate for longer periods of time. Because what compounding really highlights is that you can only get those larger returns if you're accumulating the smaller returns at the beginning. So effectively, compounding really makes an argument to get time on your side and to let sums accumulate such that we can get return on that larger sum. Another illustrative example of this is if we take an example of two people who start saving at different points in time. And we can call one Abby and we can call the other Zach. And if we say that Abby starts saving at age 25 and contributes $2,000 at the end of each year for 10 years, so that's from age 25 to just before she turns 35, and then stops contributing and does nothing except wait until she's 55, and the money is able to gain a 5% rate of return or interest, in this case probably. And Zach starts 10 years later at age 35, and he contributes for 20 years the same amount of $2,000, and again the sums accumulate at 5%. So basically we have two people. One starts at age 25, that's Abby. She contributes for only 10 years, $2,000, and we have Zach, who starts 10 years later but contributes for 20 years. And let's see what happens by the time they reach 55 and what amounts they've accumulated. And we can see this in the following exhibit. The numbers that are shown in bold are where their contributions being made, and when they're shown in regular text, i.e. not bolded, the money is just accumulating and gaining interest. What we can see very clearly from this exhibit is that Abby, who only contributed effectively $20,000, ended up with more money at age 55 than Zach, who contributed for 20 years but started 10 years later. Now this is obviously just one example, and one could do many more examples of using a spreadsheet and using different assumptions for return and amount saved depending on salary and salary increases and expenses, intention to retire, and so forth. But the point is that compounding is a very, very powerful force, and in order to get returns and accumulate larger sums of money, compounding is a key tool that can be harnessed and implemented as a part of a saving and investing plan to get to those very large sums. And the reality is that once we retire, we want to have large sums. At some point, clearly everyone probably wants to start working, and in some cases, even at some point, is no longer able to work, or has other responsibilities or other things they'd like to focus on. Now, apart from starting early, another thing that affects the amount of money that we compound to is the rate of return. And I just want to give a quick example on that. This doesn't make an argument to seek out return at all cost, i.e. with high levels of risk, but often in a bank account, in a regular checking account or saving account, we're getting very, very low rates of interest. And if we're able to take a sum of money that we have at the bank that we know we're not going to touch and commit it in a risk-free way to the bank, either by putting it into a CD or by seeking out another instrument that is equally riskless effectively, but that offers a higher rate of return, we can increase the amount of money that we compound to. And I just want to illustratively show an example of money that accumulates at 1% versus money that accumulates at 3%. And this is shown in the following exhibit. Many more examples like this, and obviously the rates of return have a great impact on what we end up with. Now, the reality is that the stock market, the S&P 500 for example in the United States, has offered a return in excess of 10% over the last 50 years if you include dividends and dividend reinvestment. But I just want to give a simple example using a rate of return of around 7% and see what we would get to making regular contributions of $20 a day, or effectively roughly $7,200 per year. Now, effectively what we're assuming here is that we're saving $600 per month every year, and we're doing this for 30 years. Now, this may or may not be realistic for someone, but it is an example to illustrate the power of compounding. And we're assuming a rate of return here of 7%, and we're making contributions of $600 per month, or $7,200 per year. And this is shown, the results are shown in the exhibit. From this exhibit is that we're accumulating extremely large sums of money at the end of 30 years. Now, many people might say, well, 30 years from now, I don't know what's going to happen. And if I'm planning for 30 years from now, I have other big problems that take place in the next 1 to 2 years. Well, the reality of the saving and investing approach that I think we have to think about is that these are things that run in the background. These are not things that we actively have to do and that are going to change anything else in our lives. Basically, what we're committing to doing, or what ideally we're going to do, is we're going to set aside some money that's going to automatically go into some saving product or into a mutual fund, or be put aside from one bank account to a higher interest bank account, or into a pension plan where we can save tax as well. So the idea is not here to basically manage this and make this the focus of our lives for the next 30 years. The idea is really to have this set up once and to have it run in the background for the next 30 years, and really effectively to forget about it largely, because this is the kind of thing that if it's set up properly, we're taking sums of money that we wouldn't have needed and that we're not going to be spending. And the reality for most of us is that when we get a salary increase, we typically spend all the money that we make, and when we have less money, we typically spend all the money that we make as well. In other words, we tend to adjust our spending patterns according to what we make. And if we were to simulate a lower salary by taking an amount out that goes directly into a savings plan, we probably wouldn't notice it that much, unless, obviously we're taking huge percentages of our salary. What I want to show lastly is just how important compounding is also on the other side. I think we've seen that compounding is a very, very powerful tool to make savings grow and to make amounts of money grow. Now, that also applies to our debts, unfortunately. So not only does compounding make the amount of money that we've saved grow, but it also makes money that we owe grow. And in that context, the worst example, or the best example perhaps, is credit card debt. And if we were to assume a 16% interest rate on a credit card debt, and we have a debt of $10,000, the following exhibit shows that the debt is doubling within a period of 5 years, and that's something that we need to be aware of. So a CD, for example, or a DVD that might cost $15 with an interest rate of 16%, which is actually probably on the conservative side, somewhere much higher than that, would also double in price. So we have to ask ourselves whether it's worth having that kind of credit card debt, and whether it's worth paying twice as much as we actually wanted to for something when the amounts are accumulating at that speed. And so basically, the CD would have cost slightly more than twice the original price.